If we asked you to come up with a list of the nicest superheroes in Marvel Comics, then there's no doubt that you probably pick Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Okay, Spider-Man! Don't flip! Yeah!
Given this wisecracking wall crawler's kind heart, you'd think the world or the writers would at least pay him back for the good deeds he's done. Well, think again, because with that infamous Parker luck, you can bet that our favorite web-shooting superhero has been continually run through the ringer ever since his first appearance in the pages of the legendary Amazing Fantasy number 15. So, what sort of tragedies and misfortunes has old Webhead gone through? Stick around until the end of this video as we tell you about the worst things that has happened to Spider-Man. Spidey gets trapped in Doc Ock's body. Beyond the unassuming facade of a freelance photographer, there's no denying that Peter Parker is fit. He's got a lean, muscular physique that a lot of girls love, and even Otto Octavius. Speaking of Doc Ock, he makes Pugsley from the Addams Family look like Henry Cavill. He's, well, let's just say not traditionally handsome. He's short and stout, and in this story, a sickly old man with a terminal illness, just to make things worse. This is why we completely understand why Doc Ock, just as he was about to shuffle off this mortal coil, pulled an extreme version of identity theft on everyone's beloved Webhead by transferring his mind into Pete's body during Dan Slott's infamous run on the character. The result? Doc Ock becomes privy to all of Spider-Man's memories, finding out everything about the wall crawler, and we mean everything, from his secret identity as Peter Parker, right down to Spidey's favorite Euro spot for when he gets hungry after a day of web swinging. Meanwhile, Peter Parker's mind becomes suppressed, a powerless passenger, as he watches one of his greatest nemesis literally live his life both as Peter and the newly coined superior Spider-Man. Otto wastes no time to enjoy everything his new body has to offer, like kissing the gorgeous Mary Jane Watson. On the bright side, at least Otto has the decency to try and become a superhero during his stint as New York's beloved wall crawler, even if it's only in his own twisted way. MJ finds another man. One of Peter's misfortunes came in the form of finding out that Mary Jane met another man named Paul Rabin while he was gone. They even started a family, adopting a couple of kids named Owen and Stephanie in the process. This all stems from when MJ and Pete were transported to Earth TRN 1023 to fight the supervillain the Emissary. In the process, they meet Paul in this reality, and MJ successfully sends Peter back home to Earth 616, all the while trapping herself in this different Marvel universe. This caused a time dilation between the two Earths, which had MJ living with Paul for 4 years. They fall in love during that time and even continue their relationship after getting back to Earth 616, much to the wall crawler's dismay. The kid who collects Spider-Man. One of the most tragic elements of Spider-Man's entire mythos is the fact that, for the most part, he can't share his greatest secret with the people he loves. Peter's reasoning behind this is sound. After all, it's too much of a risk to have his rogues gallery go after the likes of Aunt May or MJ just so they can find out who Spidey truly is. That's not to say that there's been some exceptions to this rule. Case in point, The Amazing Spider-Man 248. In this classic one-off story, a boy named Tim Harrison, who happens to be a big Spidey fan, is visited by Marvel's resident wall crawler in his room one night. The two spend the evening talking, with Tim letting the webhead know how much he means to the kid. By the time Spidey's just about ready to get back to patrolling the neighborhood, Tim asked him who he really is. Surprisingly enough, he reveals his true identity to Tim before leaving to swing around New York's cityscape. And then it's finally revealed that the reason Pete gave the kid a pass was because Tim was actually a dying cancer patient. Sure, it's a heartwarming vignette at first glance, but this issue stands as one of the most gut-wrenching things to happen to Spider-Man when you consider that, in spite of his powers, there are things in this world that even Spider-Man can't fix. Ultimate Spider-Man dies. It's always a near unimaginable tragedy whenever a superhero provides the ultimate sacrifice, and that's exactly what happened when Ultimate Spider-Man, the Peter Parker of Earth 1610, gave his life to protect not just the innocent citizens of New York, but the most important people in his life as well. In this world, Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, and the Sinister Six, made up of supervillains like Vulture and Sandman, among others, have discovered Spidey's secret identity and are planning to take out the wall crawler's friends and family. After literally taking a bullet from the Punisher, which was meant for Captain America, Pete doesn't even think twice to soldier on and confront the dastardly supervillains to foil their plans instead of, getting some medical help. He, with the help of Iceman and the Human Torch, managed to bring the Sinister Sinister Six down. But the worst thing imaginable happens when the wall crawler gets caught in a truck explosion after successfully rescuing MJ from the Green Goblin, which kills Pete for good. In the end, Earth 1610 was left with the Spider-Man void, but we guess things ultimately, no pun intended, turned out for the better after this, considering a boy named Miles Morales eventually took up the Spider-Man mantle in this world, and the Spider-Man legacy lives on. Spidey gets PTSD. You'd think that PTSD isn't exactly a concern in a world where superheroes face world-ending threats almost on a monthly basis, but you'd be wrong, because you can always count on the comic writers to give their larger-than-life characters all too real and relatable problems. The classic Spider-Man storyline, Kraven's Last Hunt, has Kraven getting the best of Spider-Man and burying old Webhead alive, which is already bad enough. Sure, Pete ultimately triumphs against the insane big game Hunter in the end, but it's not without consequences. In The Amazing Spider-Man, Soul of the Hunter #1, Pete deals with the lasting trauma that being buried alive had brought him. For all intents and purposes, Spidey gets PTSD in this tale, and it's painful to watch. Not only does Pete have to deal with Aunt May's death here, but the man can barely function when every little thing in his life reminds him of that time he got trapped in a hole 6 feet under. These constant traumatic reminders turn the once spry and lively Spider-Man into a jittering mess who had to deal with the crippling flashbacks regardless if he puts on the suit or not. And for a superhero comic, this story nails the kind of soul-crushing drudgery that sufferers of PTSD have to go through on a daily basis. So yeah, suffice to say that it's a good read, but it's definitely not a fun one. Spider-Man and J. Jonah Jameson become family. It's a proven scientific fact that Vin Diesel nods in approval whenever anyone anywhere in the world mentions family, but we doubt he'd do it if he found out that Spider-Man and his #1 hater, J. Jonah Jameson, became family at one point in the wall crawler's long history. You heard that right. This is all thanks to Aunt May falling in love and ultimately marrying J. Jonah Jameson Sr., the Daily Bugle's publisher's dad, which effectively turned Pete and JJ Jr. into brothers. For us comic book fans, it's hilarious to learn that this is actually something that happened, but only if you're on the outside looking in. I think we all remember the kind of treatment Peter gets from Jonah.
You're fired!
Chief, the planetarium party.
Oh, right, you're unfired. I need you. Come here.
For JJ Jr., this is like having one of your least favorite employees worm their way into the Jameson family fortune, but it's even worse for Pete considering that he basically has to deal with arguably one of the greatest non-superpowered enemies both inside and outside of work. We can only imagine the kind of Thanksgiving dinners that go on inside the Parker Jameson household.
I'll send you a nice box of Christmas meat. Best I can do. Get out of here. Bring me more photos.
The death of Ultimate Gwen Stacy. We're pretty sure that you're already familiar with the death of Earth 616's Gwen Stacy at this point. In the mainline Marvel universe, Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, throws her off a bridge and Spidey was too slow to save her. Pete cries, everybody cries, and Spider-Man becomes more resolute in becoming a better superhero. But you probably didn't know the more tragic tale of how the Ultimate Universe's version of Gwen Stacy met her end. On Earth 1610, Peter Parker himself inadvertently had a hand in the blonde girl's demise. In this world, Pete, Spider-Man, offered Dr. Kirk Connors a sample of his own radioactive blood, which the scientist experimented on and eventually led to the birth of this universe's version of the supervillain Carnage. One night, Gwen Stacy is attacked by the Red Monster while on her way home, who then proceeds to drain her of all her bodily fluids, leaving her a dried out corpse. And that's it, Gwen's dead. Unlike Earth 616's Gwen, this version of the character died in what can only be described as a senseless act of violence. There wasn't an epic showdown between Spidey and Carnage, no clutch time save. It's just a girl who had a misfortune of running into a monster and getting killed. And to make matters worse, Carnage wouldn't even exist in this world if Peter didn't give his blood to Kurt. Spider-Man kills Mary Jane. Of all of Peter Parker's many love interests throughout his history, Mary Jane Watson stands as the #1 girl for the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So much so that it's hard to imagine a world where Pete ends up with someone else other than MJ. Unless you're like us and agree that Felicia Hardy was the one for him. Anyways, just imagine the kind of soul-crushing grief that the wall crawler felt when he found out that MJ was terminally ill due to radiation poisoning. That's exactly what happens within the pages of the infamous Spider-Man Reigns storyline. Set on Earth 7237, this alternate version of the wall-crawling hero eventually discovers that his wife MJ is dying from years of exposure exposure to, well, let's just say Peter Parker's intimate web fluids. The sickness ultimately overcomes her, which turns Spidey into a husk of his former self. In the wake of MJ's demise, Peter drastically quits being a superhero for decades, instead choosing to live a quiet, uneventful life, all the while haunted by MJ's memories. At the very least, this story isn't all doom and gloom, as Spidey would eventually get back on track with the help of Jonah Jameson no less, and promises his late wife that he'll join her one of these days, but will stay true to his responsibilities while he's still breathing. Spider-Man's deal with the devil. Believe it or not, Peter Parker sometimes gets his act together and achieves some happiness in spite of that pesky old Parker luck. But you can always count on the bullpen to use these fleeting moments of happiness as ammunition for Spidey's inevitable fall. A perfect example of this comes in the form of Spider-Man One More Day, where we get to see where Peter makes a deal with the literal devil of the Marvel Universe, Mephisto. Now, selling your soul to the devil is one thing, but this is Spider-Man we're talking about, so you can bet it's way worse than just that. In exchange for saving Aunt May's life after being left in a coma during the events of the classic Civil War arc, Peter strikes a deal with Mephisto, save May's life in exchange for his marriage and future with Mary Jane. Ultimately, the deal changed the course of history, wherein Pete and MJ never got married, and they would never get to have a future together, where they eventually give birth to a daughter. Even worse, Pete retains all the memories that he had with MJ after signing this dastardly deal. Gwen Stacy's affair. Yes, we all know the Gwen Stacy death is tragic, but what's worse than having your girlfriend die in your arms? In the comic world, where the dead come back to life as frequently as a soap opera, some might argue finding out that she's a cheater. That's exactly what happened to Spider-Man when he discovered that Gwen Stacy had been unfaithful to him back when she was alive. Oh, and did we mention that she cheated on Peter with Norman Osborn, the same guy who eventually killed her? Plus, their disgusting little affair even led to Gwen giving birth to a couple of twins named Sarah and Gabriel. There weren't any mind control substances here, no weird sci-fi ploy that the Green Goblin used. It was just a plain and simple lustful affair. Gwen and Norman got all hot one night and decided to make love without any Green Goblin protection. And let's not forget that this wasn't some story from an alternate Earth either. This was firmly set within Earth 616, the mainline Marvel universe, and it's so messed up on so many levels. His best friend's dad and arch nemesis getting with someone he loved so much. We can't imagine anything much worse happening to our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.